The stage lights are blinding. The crowd is on its feet. At 76, Lionel Richie still smiles like the world hasn't aged a day. His voice, warm but rougher now, wraps around the chorus of "Hello." But behind that familiar smile, behind the silk suit and the practiced charm, lies a man who has spent a lifetime hiding his pain behind the word love. Hollywood remembers him as the gentleman of Motown, the man who made romance sound effortless. Yet few know how much of that romance was written to cover loneliness. Few know how the same man who told the world to dance all night long often went home to an empty room, unable to sleep at all. His story isn't the simple arc of fame and fortune. It's the slow unraveling of someone who wanted to heal others through music, but never truly healed himself. His tragedy is quiet, almost invisible, because Lionel Richie's greatest performance wasn't on stage. It was convincing the world that he was fine. There was a time when he believed success could silence the doubts that followed him since childhood. A boy from Tuskegee, Alabama, raised by strict parents, trained to smile, to behave, to be perfect. The same discipline that made him a global icon also built the walls that kept real connection out. At the height of his fame, reporters called him the face of American elegance. But the truth was more fragile. Each hit song was a confession disguised as melody, each love ballad a letter to someone he could never fully reach. And when the world started calling him a legend, Lionel began to feel like a ghost inside his own success. Tonight, as he stands under the lights again, applause thundering, there's a flicker in his eyes, a kind of distance, the kind that only comes from realizing that the louder the world cheers, the less it really listens. Behind that eternal smile lies a man who has lost more than fame could ever give back. Lost friendships, lost time, lost the version of himself that once believed love was enough. He built a career out of saying hello, but somewhere along the way, he forgot how to say goodbye to the pain. This is not the story of a star who fell. It's the story of a man who rose so high that he could no longer hear his own heartbeat over the sound of applause. And yet, beneath the glitter, the Grammys, the endless tours, there remains the same question that haunted him from the beginning. What is the cost of being loved by everyone, but known by no one? What if I told you Lionel Richie never truly wanted to be a star? That's where our story begins.
Long before the stadiums, before the Grammys, before the silk suits and the standing ovations, Lionel Richie was just a shy boy from Tuskegee, Alabama. His father, a U.S. Army systems analyst, and his mother, a school teacher, raised him in a world of structure and expectations. The Richies were a proud family, disciplined and proper. But behind closed doors, Lionel was different. Sensitive, restless, drawn to something he couldn't quite name. He attended Tuskegee Institute, the same place where legends like Booker T. Washington had once walked. There, in the quiet courtyards and humid southern nights, Lionel first picked up a saxophone. He was supposed to be studying economics, but music kept calling. Soft at first, then louder, until it drowned out everything else. He once told a friend that he thought about becoming a priest. That calling toward faith was real, not religion, but redemption. He said he wanted to heal people somehow. In the end, he found his church in sound. By the early 1970s, Lionel joined a group of fellow Tuskegee students who called themselves the Commodores. They were young, broke, and bursting with ambition. At first, they played small college gigs, then got picked up by Motown, the holy ground of black music. That was where everything changed. At Motown, Lionel learned the art of perfection. He watched Diana Ross rehearse every smile, every gesture. He studied Smokey Robinson's lyrics line by line. He wanted to understand how emotion could be packaged into something eternal. The young man who once doubted his worth suddenly found himself shaping the sound of a generation. When he wrote Easy in 1977, he wasn't just crafting a song, he was writing a confession. Easy Like Sunday Morning wasn't about peace. It was about pretending to have peace. It was about learning to smile while walking away from something that hurt. The world sang along without realizing it was the quiet cry of a man who couldn't say what he truly felt. Then came 3 Times a Lady, the song that would make him immortal. He wrote it for his parents' anniversary, inspired by his father's words to his mother. Once for being my wife, twice for being my friend, and 3 times for the lady you are. The song became a global hit, but to Lionel, it was more than success. It was validation. Proof that love, when turned into melody, could finally be safe. He had become Motown's golden boy, the clean-cut romantic every mother adored, the gentleman every fan trusted. But behind the image was a man who feared being ordinary. He worked harder than anyone, slept less than anyone, smiled more than anyone, because he was terrified of disappearing back into the shadows he came from. By the end of the decade, the Commodores were at the top of the charts. They toured with the Jackson 5, filled arenas, and lived every musician's dream. Yet Lionel felt something missing. He was writing love songs that made the world swoon, but the fame felt hollow. He later said, "When you're on stage, you feel loved by thousands. When you walk off, you realize you don't know a single one of them." That realization would shape the rest of his life. The boy who once wanted to be a priest had become a pop god, adored, untouchable, but increasingly alone. His success wasn't about chasing fame. It was about chasing love, because love was the one thing Lionel Richie never truly felt he deserved. And soon, he would learn that the higher you climb on the promise of love, the deeper the fall when it slips away.
By the early 1980s, Lionel Richie was everywhere. His voice floated through car radios, wedding halls, and lonely apartments. Every song he touched turned to gold. Endless Love, his duet with Diana Ross, became one of the best-selling singles of all time. When he stepped out of the Commodores to go solo, people doubted him. Within a year, he proved them all wrong. His self-titled debut album sold millions. The follow-up, Can't Slow Down, turned him into an international icon. He was no longer just a singer, he was a phenomenon. His songs crossed boundaries of race and genre. Black audiences adored his soul, white audiences adored his elegance. He was polished, graceful, safe. The perfect man for the 1980s, the decade that worshipped perfection. But perfection has a price. Behind the awards, behind the tuxedos and flashing smiles, Lionel was living 2 lives. The world saw a man in control, but behind the scenes, his personal life was quietly falling apart. His marriage to Brenda Harvey, the woman who had been with him since college, began to crack under the weight of fame. The tabloids were relentless, the expectations impossible, the pressure constant. He was touring endlessly, performing for crowds of 50,000 people, but coming home to silence. He later confessed that the applause felt like anesthesia. It numbed him. The stage was his only place of peace. Offstage, he was lost. In 1988, that illusion shattered. Brenda discovered Lionel's affair with another woman, dancer Diane Alexander.
What followed was one of the most publicized scandals of the decade. Brenda reportedly stormed into the other woman's apartment, leading to an altercation that landed her in handcuffs and Lionel on the front pages. The man who sang about eternal love was now the face of betrayal. But what the headlines missed was the human truth beneath it. Lionel wasn't just unfaithful, he was exhausted, lonely, and confused. In his own words, he was trying to be everything to everyone and ended up being nothing to himself. Around the same time, his voice, the very thing that built his empire, began to fail. Years of strain and constant touring caused severe throat issues. Doctors warned him he might never sing again. The diagnosis hit him like a death sentence. He went from arenas to hospital rooms, from thunderous applause to absolute silence. He later revealed that those months were the darkest of his life. The man who gave the world "Say You, Say Me" and "All Night Long" could barely speak. He isolated himself completely. Friends stopped calling, his marriage ended, the mansion that once felt like a dream home turned into a gilded cage. He would stare at his own platinum records and feel nothing. Lionel once said, "You can have 1,000,000 people screaming your name and still feel invisible." It was in that silence that the perfection he had built began to crumble. The smile became harder to fake. The love songs began to sound like eulogies. But even in those moments, something inside him refused to die. He started writing again, not for charts, not for fans, but for himself. Small songs, private songs, notes scribbled on napkins that no one else would ever hear. He was beginning to understand that his real story wasn't about the hits. It was about the distance between the man the world adored and the man he truly was. The world danced to his songs of love while he was quietly losing his own. And soon, that silence would grow so heavy, Lionel Richie would disappear completely.
When the lights finally dimmed and the noise faded, Lionel Richie did something no one expected. He disappeared. The man who once ruled the charts simply walked away from it all. For nearly a decade, there were no tours, no interviews, no new albums. It was as if he had evaporated, leaving only the echoes of "Hello" and "Endless Love" to haunt the airwaves. The press called it burnout. Insiders whispered about depression. But Lionel himself later admitted he wasn't sure he wanted to live at all. Fame had swallowed him whole, and when it spat him out, he didn't recognize the person left behind. During those lost years of the early 1990s, he withdrew to his home in Beverly Hills. Curtains drawn, phones unanswered. Friends who tried to visit were turned away. He had gone from one of the most visible men in the world to a shadow. He'd wake up at noon, wander from room to room, and sometimes not speak to anyone for days. But then came the one thing that pulled him back from the edge. A little girl named Nicole. Nicole Camille Escovedo was the daughter of Lionel's friends, Peter and Karen. Their parents were struggling financially and couldn't provide stability. Lionel and his then-wife Brenda began taking care of her when she was just a toddler. What started as temporary guardianship quietly turned into adoption. It was supposed to be Lionel helping a child in need, but what no one realized was that Nicole was saving him. In interviews years later, Nicole said something that stopped everyone who heard it. "He saved me, but he didn't know he was saving himself." That line carries more truth than any song Lionel ever wrote. Because through Nicole, Lionel rediscovered something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Caring for her gave him structure, a reason to get out of bed, to speak again, to feel again. He wasn't Lionel Richie the star anymore. He was Dad. And in that role, stripped of ego, stripped of spotlight, he found the one thing fame had never given him: unconditional love. But the healing was slow, fragile. His throat still ached from overuse. His spirit was still cracked. Every time he tried to write, the melodies came out heavy, haunted. It was as if the joy had drained out of the music. He once described those years as living underwater, still breathing, but barely. Friends like Kenny Rogers and Quincy Jones urged him to return to the studio. They reminded him that music was his lifeline, but Lionel resisted. He said he was afraid that his voice would betray him, that the world had moved on, that the man they once loved no longer existed. It wasn't until Nicole began school, proudly introducing herself as Nicole Richie, my dad is Lionel, that something inside him stirred. He realized that even if the world forgot him, his daughter hadn't, and maybe that was enough reason to start again. By the mid-1990s, he cautiously re-emerged, not as the unstoppable hitmaker, but as a survivor. He began writing new songs, tentatively stepping into the studio again. The sound was different now, deeper, rougher, more human. He once described those years as living underwater, still breathing, but barely. The comeback was slow, uncertain. But for Lionel Richie, it wasn't about fame anymore. It was about breathing again. And yet, the past doesn't stay buried for long.
When Lionel Richie finally reappeared in the mid-1990s, the world had changed. Grunge ruled the charts, hip-hop was rewriting America's heartbeat, and the soulful ballads that once made him untouchable had faded into nostalgia. The world was faster, louder, colder. But Lionel didn't come back for the world. He came back for himself. His first step was Louder Than Words in 1996, an album that many dismissed as too safe, out of time. But for Lionel, it wasn't a failure. It was therapy. He once said, "I just needed to hear myself again. I needed to know I could still speak." The songs carried the bruises of a man who had seen too much. Don't Want to Lose You sounded like an apology. Ordinary Girl, written for Nicole, was a father's soft promise to never disappear again. The man who once filled stadiums was now rebuilding from the ground up. His voice had changed, thinner, cracked around the edges. He retrained it patiently, learning to sing not for perfection, but for truth. He told friends, "I can't sing like before, but maybe that's a good thing. Now I sound like a man who's lived." He called his next album Renaissance. The word fit. It wasn't about returning to the top. It was about being reborn. The world still recognized him, but differently now. Not as a chart machine, but as a survivor of an era that chewed up dreamers and spat out ghosts. He toured again. Smaller venues this time, fewer lights, more stories. Between songs, he'd tell the crowd about his daughter, about faith, about learning to laugh at the things that once broke him. People didn't come just to hear the hits anymore. They came to hear him. Yet, even surrounded by applause, Lionel felt the echo of something hollow. After each concert, when the stage emptied and the crowd dispersed, he'd sit in silence. Friends who visited him backstage noticed how his smile always faded the moment the door closed. He would stare at his reflection and whisper, "You're still here, but who are you now?" He later admitted that those were the loneliest years of his career. Success no longer thrilled him. It only reminded him how temporary everything was. He began writing in notebooks, not lyrics this time, but questions. What does love mean when you've lost it? What does fame mean when no one really sees you? Through it all, Nicole became his anchor. She was growing up, starting her own career, stepping into her own fame. Lionel watched with both pride and fear. He knew what the spotlight could do to fragile hearts. He told her once, "The world will always love you for what you give them. Make sure you still love yourself when they stop asking." By the late 2000s, Lionel had made peace with his past. He no longer chased perfection. The wrinkles on his face became part of his charm, the gravel in his voice part of his honesty. He could finally sing without pretending to be invincible. He said, "When I sing now, I don't perform the song, I live it." He was no longer the man who needed the world to listen. He had learned something deeper, that silence too could be a kind of applause. But peace is never permanent. Behind every smile that has weathered storms lies the memory of what was lost. And as Lionel aged, surrounded by wealth, fame, and love from strangers, one truth grew impossible to ignore. Even legends get lonely.
By the 2010s, Lionel Richie had become something rare in the world of pop, a living monument. He wasn't just an artist anymore. He was a reference point, a reminder of an era when music spoke softly and still reached the soul. Everywhere he went, people smiled. They thanked him for soundtracking their weddings, their heartbreaks, their childhoods. But the truth was, Lionel no longer knew how to handle being worshipped. Fame had turned from a dream into a mirror, one that reflected everything except who he really was. He joined American Idol in 2018 as a judge, stepping into the role of mentor for a generation raised on instant fame. On screen, he was warm, funny, endlessly patient, the perfect elder statesman of pop. Off screen, the silence returned. Watching young artists cry over rejection reminded him of something he had long buried, the terror of becoming irrelevant. He often stayed behind after filming ended, sitting alone in the empty studio, listening to the echo of the stage. One producer recalled finding him there late at night, humming to himself. When asked if he was okay, Lionel just smiled and said, "I'm fine. I just like the quiet now." But quiet can be dangerous when you've lived your whole life in noise. Many of his old friends were gone: Kenny Rogers, Tina Turner, Michael Jackson. The phone calls had stopped. The dinners turned into memorials. He was, as one friend put it, the last man standing at a table that used to be full. He lived in his grand Beverly Hills estate, surrounded by gold records and trophies, but the house often felt like a museum curated by ghosts. Every award was a memory of someone who wasn't there anymore. Every photograph smiled back from a time that no longer existed. He still performed occasionally, because performing was the only thing that reminded him he was alive. But after each concert, when the band packed up and the audience faded into the night, Lionel would linger. He would look at the empty seats, then close his eyes as if listening for something, maybe applause, maybe an echo of the boy who once believed music could save him. He once told a journalist, "When the crowd sings 'hello' with me, I feel them. But when it stops, I feel the weight of everyone I've lost." There's a strange ache that comes with outliving your own legend. To the world, you're timeless. To yourself, you're a shadow moving through borrowed light. And yet, Lionel never complained. He still showed up with that gracious smile, still told young artists to follow their hearts, still signed autographs with the same neat handwriting. But when someone asked him what success really means after all these years, he paused for a long time before answering, "Success is surviving yourself." A close friend once said, that Lionel never learned how to rest. He feared that if he stopped moving, the silence would swallow him whole. In one of his last long conversations with Rogers before Kenny passed, Lionel said quietly, "We all wanted to be seen. I just wanted to be heard." Kenny nodded and replied, "You were. Maybe more than you know." That moment stayed with Lionel, not because it comforted him, but because it reminded him that no one ever escapes the loneliness of being known by millions, but understood by none. The crowds still sing, the lights still burn, but when he walks off stage now, Lionel Richie doesn't rush to the after-party. He just closes the door behind him, takes a deep breath, and lets the silence settle, the only sound that still feels honest. Beneath the elegance and poise that still define him at 76, there lies a truth Lionel Richie has never fully spoken. It isn't about the failed marriages or the tabloid scandals or the years lost to silence. The real tragedy of Lionel Richie is quieter, the slow erosion of meaning inside a life that once seemed to have it all. His face remains calm, his voice still golden when he speaks. But those closest to him know that the man who once filled entire arenas with songs about love now struggles to feel the very thing he gave the world. In private moments, Lionel has admitted that aging under the spotlight is a peculiar kind of humiliation. He said, "You spend decades pretending not to care what people think, then realize your whole life has depended on it. Every wrinkle becomes a headline. Every tremor in the voice becomes a rumor. Every honest word gets twisted into drama." He's still performing, still smiling, but the body that carried him through 5 decades of music has started to betray him. The energy, the stamina, the effortless glow, all fading quietly. Fans still see the gentleman, the legend, the icon. What they don't see are the mornings he wakes up unable to sing a note, his throat stiff and breath short, his reflection a stranger. In one rare interview, Lionel spoke about a moment that changed him. He said he was rehearsing alone in his home studio when he suddenly stopped halfway through "Say You, Say Me." His voice cracked, not from strain, but from something deeper. He looked around the empty room, the gold records on the wall, and realized he had no one left to dedicate the song to. That night, he didn't pick up the phone. He didn't write. He just sat in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of applause. For Lionel, music had always been the language of connection. But now, after decades of giving, he finds himself wondering if anyone ever truly listened. He once confessed to a friend, "I wrote about love because I was terrified of being alone. I didn't know the songs would come true." That loneliness, that slow fading of intimacy, is what fame never prepares you for. When you spend your life performing tenderness for millions, it becomes harder to recognize the real thing when it appears. There's also the burden of legacy, a word that once sounded noble, now heavy as stone. Lionel fears not being remembered for his truth, but for his mask. He once said quietly, "I built a career on love songs, but maybe I was just trying to believe them." And in that confession lies the heartbreak at the core of his story. The tragedy of Lionel Richie isn't a scandal or a fall from grace. It's the emptiness that success couldn't fill, the silence that love couldn't cure. Those who see him on stage today still see the magic, the charm, the smooth voice, the effortless warmth. But if you look closely, there's a distance in his eyes, as if part of him is somewhere else, listening for an echo that never comes. He spent a lifetime writing songs that made the world feel less alone, but when the curtain falls and the lights go out, Lionel Richie remains what he's always been, the man who gave everyone love except himself.
There's a quiet moment that comes at the end of every concert,
The crowd still hums with energy, the stage lights begin to dim, and Lionel Richie stands alone, microphone in hand, watching the faces that once mirrored his own youth. In that moment, he smiles. Not the perfect stage smile, but something softer, older, almost grateful. He knows how rare it is to still be here, to have outlasted time, to have turned the pain of living into songs that refuse to die. In recent years, the world has tried to celebrate him the way it does all its legends. Lifetime Achievement Awards, magazine tributes, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The ceremonies are grand, the applause thunderous. But when Lionel steps off the stage, there's a look in his eyes that says he understands the truth behind all this, that legacy is a polite word for goodbye. He once said, "The older you get, the more you realize success is not the prize, survival is." Survival has always been Lionel's quiet rebellion. Through loss, scandal, illness, and solitude, he has refused to surrender the one thing that fame could never buy, the will to keep singing. Not for glory, not even for recognition, but because music is the only way he knows how to exist. At 76, he is no longer chasing the spotlight. He lets it find him when it wants to. His performances are smaller now, more intimate, stripped of spectacle. He sits at the piano, talks to the audience, tells them stories between songs. Sometimes he even laughs at himself, the failed notes, the forgotten lyrics, the cracks in his voice. He says, "It's just life, and it's all part of the song." In that humility, there is beauty. He has become what he once sought. Not a god of pop, but a witness of time. Yet, the hidden tragedy never leaves entirely. It lingers behind every melody, in the spaces between verses, in the quiet after applause. The irony of Lionel Richie's life is that the man who gave the world its greatest love songs never truly found a love that stayed. But perhaps that's why those songs endure, because they were never written from perfection, but from longing. He has learned to make peace with that longing. He lives surrounded by reminders, photographs of his children, a piano that has outlasted decades, a garden that he tends himself. There are days when he still sings the old songs, not to the audience, but to the silence. When asked what he wants to be remembered for, Lionel paused before answering. "I hope they remember that I tried, that I gave everything I had, not to be famous, but to make people feel less alone." Maybe that's what greatness really is. Not how loud the applause gets, but how much silence you can live with afterward. So now, when Lionel walks out under the lights, there's no pretense left. Just an old man with a piano, a cracked but steady voice, and a lifetime of memories stitched into melody. He no longer sings to the world. He sings to the boy from Tuskegee, the one who once wanted to heal people, the one who found his church in sound. The crowd listens, the lights glow, and somewhere between the notes of hello and the hush that follows, Lionel Richie finally finds what he spent his entire life searching for. Not fame, not forgiveness, but peace. Because in the end, every legend must face the same truth. The light that made them shine was never meant to last, but the warmth it leaves behind, that, somehow, is eternal.